No, you got it, man. Yo, yours looks great. Doing my best. A little over a year. I started August of 2019. This year to start off with is to get my YouTube game right. I got a bunch of videos in the pipeline now, so I will have a little bit of a head start, so I could consistently drop them. Dropping weekly videos all next year. It's always a bunch of stuff I forget before the stream. I always gotta get set up in the first couple minutes every time. I got one on the way. Our first, me and my wife are expecting our first. I do in March. Thank you. I'm very excited. I'm extremely excited. Yeah, I wasn't at first. I'm not gonna lie to you. Wasn't at first. We've been together for a long time, living a good life. We've been together for like 12 years, living the dream. And then, we were kind of planning it, kind of not, and then it kind of happened. And we're like, well, here we go. So, pretty excited. How many? Woo! Oh man, yeah, I'm gonna have to come to you for some advice for sure. I'm definitely gonna have to come to you with some advice.
What's good, YouTube? It's your boy Dewan. Today we got a special one. The industry is changing. If you did not know, we got the cloud, we got network automation, we got software development, we got everything being IoT and being created at the edge and as close to the customer as possible. And one of the people that are leading that change is none other than the CEO of MasterMnd Technical Talent Pipeline Company, Twitch extraordinaire, former SRE, and lead DevOps engineer. We have the CEO of MasterMnd, Aaron Brooks. What's good, my brother?
I appreciate the riveting intro, man. I appreciate it. Everything's good. Everything's good. How you doing today?
Ah, man, I'm blessed, man. Thank you for coming on.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, man. You know, I feel blessed to have been invited.
Yo, hey, it was only a matter of time before we made this happen. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, getting this thing started off right. Talk to me about who Aaron Brooks is.
Right. So my hey everybody, my name is Aaron Brooks. I am the founder and CEO of a company called MasterMnd, which you know, Dewan said is a technical talent pipeline company. So I run a company that basically what we do is we ignite passion in tech, and then we help connect that passion to opportunity. We do that in a couple different ways. The first is MasterMnd Academy, and there's a link I think in the description of the channel. So I appreciate you putting that in there, Dewan. But we run completely free boot camps, no obligation boot camps. Say what you want. Boot camp, we do in everything digital delivery. So that is software engineering, cloud computing, DevOps and SRE stuff. We're going to be doing things in Agile as well, maybe even some design stuff in the future. And, you know, we run all that for free on Twitch, 3 different levels of each show. You can check out that link if you're interested. We're starting up a couple of them after the new year. But like I said, completely free to sign up, completely free to participate in. But yeah, I do that because I'm passionate about tech for no other reason than I'm passionate about tech. And I think that tech has changed my life. I've had opportunities that I never thought I would ever have. And I think that I want to be able to scale access and scale opportunity. And that's, you know, that's why I do it. That's what MasterMnd is. But yeah, I'm a DevOps engineer by trade, SRE DevOps engineer. I've played all the roles. You know, they mean different things at different companies, and maybe we'll get into that a little bit tonight. But yeah, I have about maybe about 12 years of experience in the industry, doing lots of different things, worked at a lot of different companies. Started out as, you know, I'm a DevOps guy from the ops side of things. So I started out my career, systems administration, well, help desk for sure. Started off at, you know, at the help desk, moved up from there, went to systems administration, on some other things, web operations engineering, into a NOC, into DevOps roles, and did some SRE stuff. So, you know, I've been out kind of all over the place. And I decided to take, you know, the things that I've learned and be able to share that with as many people as possible. Awesome. So, man, you've been in the industry 12 years and you've been doing DevOps. The DevOps, we'll talk about what that is here in a minute. But how long have you been doing DevOps? I think I've been doing what is considered to be the role of DevOps probably for about the past five and a half, or DevOps SRE combination of the two, but for the past about 5 years.
So you're like ahead of your time. When I say you caught the trend and you were in it at the right time to now be leading that trend.
100%. I definitely caught the wave right at the right time, and a little bit of luck, a little bit of just being curious. You know, just right timing. I wasn't like, oh, this DevOps thing's about to take off at all. Just kind of followed a bit of my interest. Honestly, some of it was a little bit of chasing money, seeing where the skills were at. You know, kind of being bored in the house and you know, going to Starbucks because I had a work from home role, going to Starbucks and be like, you know, I'm gonna watch a Netflix show, then I'm gonna learn something and see what kind of jobs I can get, see what kind of money I can make. That was really the goal in the beginning, but that's kind of what led me into it.
Man, that's awesome. So the question I'm sure everyone has right now that is new to, I would say, the cloud, software development, and system administration and network automation is, what is DevOps? Because you talk about it around an organization, you talk about it around a business model, you talk about it as being something you do as a DevOps engineer, but it's not really something you do. Can you kind of explain it?
Absolutely. So I'm pretty passionate about these things, and so I do want to preface this by saying there is DevOps as a culture and what it's supposed to be, and then there's DevOps as the industry uses it and defines it. So I'll separate that a little bit. But DevOps really is a guy named Nathan Harvey kind of said it best at he used to work for Chef. Now I think he's a cloud advocate at Google, I think. But he said it's a professional cultural movement. That's the biggest thing. It's a cultural movement. It has nothing to do with the technology that allows high velocity organizations to be able to deliver software rapidly and to move faster. And so it really is about the culture of things. It's really about the ethos of what you're doing rather than what you're doing. But it's this is where people get a little confused, and this is why people why it is so overwhelming, is that it's a culture that's enabled by the tooling. So it's a culture that doesn't exist by all these DevOps tools. DevOps isn't a thing that you do as a culture, but you do need the tools to implement these this ethos, to implement these rules, these things that you live by. And so yeah, it really is a pretty interesting thing. What I like to tell people is that true DevOps really is, a lot of people like to attribute it directly to infrastructure, but really in DevOps, the goal is to empower the developers, and the development team. So not just the developers, but the development team to move as fast as they want to, not as fast as possible, but as fast as the development team wants to be able to move. So your customer in DevOps is really the developers and not necessarily the person that you're making the product for. And it really is building those pipelines and building in those feedback loops so that you can move quickly and consistently and reliably.
Yes. So DevOps, 3 ways, DevOps principles. You want to kind of break those down so people can kind of understand?
So principal DevOps, there are a couple different pillars, and if you can look at a lot of different things to kind of see this, but people will usually show you the little infinity loop of building. And so the planning, the preparation, then the implementation and the development and the testing, the automated testing and building and testing pipelines, the staging and the releasing, the receiving feedback, and then iterating on that. So going right back into the planning. But my pillars of DevOps really are one, the automation. I think automation is at the forefront of what DevOps is, and this is where the scary part, I think, comes in for a lot of people. And this is what a lot of the tools do for you. They allow you to automate things that we usually do manually. Things like testing code, things like building code, things like moving packages and moving artifacts around. So creating these CI pipelines. And getting the automatic deployments, infrastructure as code, all of this stuff. All these are simply tools to be able to automate things that we usually do manually. Why do we need to automate them? Because humans are fallible. We make mistakes. I can't tell you how many servers. I got fat fingers, man. I really do. I can't tell you how many servers I messed up by mistyping something, and maybe we got 13 servers we got to log into and do them one by one, and I messed up. So automation is kind of at the forefront. Tight feedback loops is a bigger one. So the goal of DevOps is not to push out a perfect product. It is to be able to move quickly. And the way that you move quickly is to be able to get something out there, receive feedback on whether it's working well, whether people like it, get feedback on to see if it's doing what you intended it to do, and then being able to iterate on that as quickly as possible. So there are places that used to go months before doing releases, months in between releases, but a lot of the DevOps workflows nowadays, the last organization I worked for, we were doing 15 deployments a day. We did 10, 15 deployments a day, no problem. Completely automated pipeline from the person's computer into production. And so that's pretty interesting. And then the last thing is I think this is going to be some overlap here between the DevOps and the SRE stuff. And the last piece is the reliability piece. But it's a little more nuanced. It's a little more nuanced than that. Like I said, there's a bunch of overlap there, and maybe I don't know if we're going to dive into the SRE stuff pretty soon, but that's kind of where the DevOps stuff stops. Yes, most organizations make DevOps people manage the entire infrastructure, and that's fine. That is absolutely can be part of your job. But the goal of DevOps is to really be able to deliver that code, and so it can stop there. It can stop at the the continuously integration part and the delivering of the artifact. But you may not necessarily need to worry about the deployment or worrying about the infrastructure. But making sure all those things are reliable, I think, is the last pillar that I would say of DevOps. Those are the 3 main ones that I like to promote. But you'll definitely get different opinions. Different places as you go to find out about it.
Agree. Before we kind of dive into what a DevOps engineer does, when it comes to DevOps, one of the things that I learned by getting DevOps certified and going through the training and being in my own software development pipeline is that a lot of the fundamental knowledge of DevOps, like I began to apply to my own life. You know what I mean?
100%.
Are you the same way?
Yeah. Yes. That idea of iteration really, like, honestly, I would not have been able to start or run a business at all without employing some of those things. Being able to just get something out the door and to iterate on it, and get feedback, get proper feedback. Taking that information, synthesize it, and go ahead and move forward with the next thing, so that you can reach perfection. You're never going to be perfect, but perfection quicker. Again, even with the streams, man. If you go back and look at my streams from a year ago to today, or to the boot camps, even I actually, they're on YouTube. I want someone to kind of take a look at some of the old ones and then see, come on January 4th and see the difference in kind of what's included now, and what's changed. It's actually pretty substantial, but 100%, I use it in a lot of aspects of life.
Nice. I'm glad you mentioned the getting the product out as fast as possible. For those of you that are going into 2020 and you want to start a YouTube channel, you want to start a blog, you want to start a business, one of the great things about DevOps is that there's a concept of MVP, minimal viable product, meaning that whatever your idea is, you get it out, and then you have feedback, which is like the second way of DevOps. You get your feedback, and then you make the changes and improve, because traditional DevOps or traditional software development, product development, like Aaron was saying, like waterfall. You want to get everything perfect, then you deliver it out to your customer. But with DevOps, it allows you to just have the idea, start building the code, get it out, get feedback, and improve it incrementally. What you think, Aaron?
100%. So I think the iteration part of it is I think it's more of the agile workflow piece, and again, the DevOps is specifically putting in those structures, those technical structures, really to allow you to be able to iterate quickly. But yeah, 100%, it's definitely all about the iteration. Your first product should be awful. Your first versions you look at, they're going to be bad. Like, they're going to be bad. And I think as people have kind of learned more about getting user feedback and understanding what a product really should be, like, you can't put out a perfect product. Like, if no one's using it, you don't know how people are intending to use it. You have a way that you want them to use it, but they're never going to use it the way that you want them to use it. And the things that people want are always different from what you think that they want. And so it's definitely the me personally, I'm all into it. I fully subscribe to that pattern of product development.
Agreed. So kind of shifting gears, when it comes to DevOps, do you have to write code? Are you a software developer? I know you said you were a system administrator. How did you transition into software development, and how does that play a role in DevOps?
Right. So, like I said, automation is key. It is a big part of DevOps. Now, that does not mean that you need to write code, and there are a lot of people practicing DevOps who don't write code. You can set up automation without writing code, but you will be more efficient. You will be better at your job by being able to code. So, one, the way that I was able to do it is I was I was big into Linux. I was a Linux administrator, so I had a good handle on Bash and Bash scripting. So that's kind of the first aspect of automation. Scripts are, people like, everyone wants to use these crazy tools. No, right? If you want to start your journey of DevOps, simply write a script to automate something small that you do every day. Maybe every day at your company, at the end of the day, a database dump or something that's taken, and then someone has to manually move it into another storage location and rename some stuff. Write a simple script to kind of do that for you at the end of the day. It doesn't need to be something crazy, something super robust. And so it's a really good place to start. But where things do get tough is because DevOps is supposed to bridge kind of the gap and kind of remove the proverbial wall between development and operations. You have DevOps people who come from the ops side of things, a lot of them which come from the ops side of things, the system side of things, and some that come from the dev side of things. And I learned very quickly that the DevOps engineers who come from the dev side of things have an advantage. They have an advantage in the way that they think and the way that they understand the automating of processes. And that was pretty interesting. So I do think it's very helpful to have to learn how to code. I started with Python. I did go to school. I never graduated. So I did start to learn how to code in school. I went for mechanical engineering, switched to computer science. None of it was for me because I was an athlete. I was on a track and field team. I did awful. I switched to BTA, which is Business Technology Administration. Ultimately dropped out. Never finished. I actually didn't find it to be all that valuable, to be honest. Anyway, but either way, like I didn't learn how to code very well in school, and it was tough for me to learn how to code on my own, and that was a mistake. That was a mistake to try to do it on my own. I think some people are autodidacts, some people are not. Some people can just go off and learn things on their own. Some people can't, and some people you can do it for some topics, but not all topics. I think programming and software development is one that is difficult to learn alone. It's not doable, but it's difficult. But I do absolutely, I absolutely push people towards picking up a programming language, usually Python. If your goal is to, especially if you have some ops experience already, you have some systems experience, I think Python it's the way to go right now. I'm a big fan of Go as well. But so yeah, it took me time. It took me a lot of time to get it. I was not one of those people who was like, yep, I got it. I looked at it. I got it all. I had to like learn a bunch of different times. And then what really helped is actually getting my first real DevOps role where I was actually ingrained with the development team. Before I wasn't a part of the development team, even though I was doing DevOps works. And so once I was able to do that, like I was in with the code. I got to see the stuff. And so they were doing a bunch of JavaScript, and it kind of I started to learn through osmosis how this stuff worked, and it just started to make sense. But absolutely, I definitely think you need to learn how to code. But again, there's a lot of these automation tools and tooling. There's Terraform, there's configuration management tools like Chef or Puppet. They have their own configuration languages. So the don't necessarily focus on learning a language, like learning how to use Python the best. It's really learning about programming concepts, what you can do with a programming language to solve a problem. Once you get those concepts down, you can really pick up really any language. But I do think it's an important part, but you can absolutely get into the industry and you can be effective in the industry without it. You can still set up automation without learning how to code, but it's harder.
Okay, so there's a bunch to unpack from what you just said. Let's start at the beginning. You mentioned Linux. How does Linux play a role in DevOps, and how important is it for someone that wants to get in DevOps to learn Linux?
It's a must. I don't know how you could avoid it. I really don't know how you could avoid it. Now, you don't need to go out and get your Red Hat cert. You don't need to get your RHCSA at all. But you need to know your way around the command line really well. You need to know command line navigation. You need to know how to do file and text manipulation. I think you need to be able to find things and know where things are, and to be able to parse log files. It is extremely helpful. I really don't know how you could be effective without having a foundation in Linux. Again, you don't need to be amazing. I worked with a woman. She was a QA tester on the team. She was a QA intern, and she decided she wanted to be DevOps. And we started working with her. And it's interesting because she got to learn all the cloud stuff and all that stuff. She got to see firsthand, and she got to go into that first. And she wasn't amazing at Linux, but again, she started to pick up the foundational things, and that's where she had the most issues. But it's something that you're going to have to pick up. Linux is incredibly important, I think, in doing DevOps.
Okay, so how do you start with Linux from a DevOps perspective?
Right. The best way to learn Linux is to use it. And I know people bring that up all the time. I've heard other people say that before. And at first it was confusing. And you're like, you don't know. The problem is you don't know how to use Linux. You're like someone tells you to go use a thing, or someone tells you, oh, you want to learn Python, go build projects. You're like, well, what do I build? Like, what is that? The thing with Linux is that Linux is an operating system, and so yes, it is running on servers, and yes, you can log into a remote computer and do stuff, and that's great. But you can also install Linux directly onto a computer, and Linux Desktop is actually a really robust platform, and it was super helpful for me to go all in. And I completely wiped Windows off of my computer at the time when I was learning it, and I put it on my computer. And what happened was you are forced to to have to dive into solutioning for your own computer. Yeah, your computer might not have a compatible Linux Wi-Fi card. Now my Wi-Fi does not work, and when I Google it, people are going to tell you how to fix it. The answer is there, but you got to go implement it, and it's really not incredibly tough to do. But I highly recommend people throw themselves into the fire. I don't necessarily think you need to wipe your computer. People who are using Macs or Windows now, Linux comes. So Mac is Unix based, very close to Linux. So you can use your terminal right there on your Mac and start practicing opening up files, practice, moving things around your computer through the command line rather than doing it from the GUI, the graphical user interface. Same thing with Windows. There's the Windows subsystem for Linux. Linux is that important that Windows now ships an entire Linux kernel inside of Windows. It is that important. And so you can do the same things there, and you can learn how to do some of the tasks on your computer through Linux, through the command line rather than anything else. But if you have an extra computer lying around, if you're good with computers, I say go all in. You can also grab a $5 VPS off of like Linode or Amazon or something as well to kind of use as a remote development environment. That's what I do now, and that's what we're going to be kind of doing in the boot camps, just to give everyone the opportunity to have the same playing field. But it's the barrier to entry for learning Linux is it's pretty accessible nowadays.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Shout out to everybody that's tuning in. Shout out to Keep It Techie and all the moderators. I know Keep It Techie is heavy into Linux right now on his channel. Thank you all for moderating and handling the chat. And if you all have questions, please leave them in the chat. Today, we're here with Aaron Brooks of MasterMnd. He's sharing everything about DevOps. He's the CEO of MasterMnd. That's a company that specializes in technical training for talent pipelines around DevOps automation. So if you want to get in DevOps or become an SRE, he does a lot of Twitch streams. He shares a lot of information, and he's doing his thing in the community. Now, when we talk about a DevOps engineer, you mentioned that you don't know you do not have to know how to code. So with that being said, and I do want to talk about Agile, but when it comes to being a DevOps engineer, do you have sprints? I know we need to talk about Agile so everybody understand what a sprint is, but if you want to start with Agile first and then lead into that question, that works too.
Yeah. So DevOps works really well. It works really well when done with Agile, mostly because Agile itself is designed to be pretty iterative. And so it does work well when it's done with Agile. Agile's a project management methodology. It's a way of managing projects. And it's designed around these things called sprints, which is a confined time of work. Could be 2 weeks, could be 1 week. People do micro sprints now, which is like 2 or 3 days. You can have a month sprint, whatever. But you take everyone understands the scope of the work. You take some time beforehand, figure out what this work, how difficult you believe this work is going to be as a team. You scope everything else so everyone's on the same page. Then you take on as much work as you think you can complete in that confined time space, and then you work on it. And then you work on it, and then at the very end, as you wrap up, you do a review and a retro. You show everyone what you did. You show your stakeholders what you did. You talk about amongst your team what went great, what went bad. Again, that feedback cycle, so you can immediately talk about your pain points and the things that went great, so that you can implement them into your next iteration, your next sprint. And so DevOps works really, really well. It works really, really well with that. There are some situations where it doesn't. A lot of DevOps and infrastructure type work works better on a Kanban board, which you've probably seen the swim lanes of like to do, doing, done, and Agile implements that as well, but again on a smaller scale. But I think that infrastructure work gets a little bit weird, but that's what Agile is. It's a way of managing a project, the same way that DevOps is a way of doing things. Exactly. That is a Kanban board right there. It's a Kanban board right there. And I think Kanban's pretty interesting. It's pretty cool. But if you ever use Trello or anything like that, you can Kanban is kind of outside of Agile. A lot of people think it is Agile, not necessarily Agile. But yeah, that's what Agile is. But I can't remember what you asked about DevOps in regards to that.
So the Kanban board is like the first way of the first principle of DevOps and Agile when it comes to the sprints. My question was, you mentioned that a DevOps engineer does not necessarily need to know how to code. So do they have sprints?
Oh yeah, yes, yeah. So, I mean, the reason, let me also clear this up too. The reason I said I do think that you should do your best to learn how to code. You don't need to know how to learn how to code, and that's more so not because of the definition of DevOps, but because of how the industry defines what DevOps is to a lot of people. And I skipped over that before, but a lot of companies will use DevOps and SRE as a ubiquitous term for people who manage infrastructure. That's what it's kind of become nowadays. And so you might get a DevOps role where you are doing true DevOps things and where you do need to learn how to code, but there are a lot of them out there who just need someone, honestly, who need a systems administrator who knows how to do some things in the cloud, who knows how to spin some cloud infrastructure up, to be honest. And so in that case, yes, you still would be working in sprints. Again, but it's a little bit harder to do sometimes into breaking down the scope of that work. But yeah, you might get this sprint. You might say, hey, you need to set up one of your tasks is to set up a VPC configuration for all the developers that's going to have, these, your public and private subnets and all these other things specifically. And that's your task that's one of your tasks for this sprint. And maybe another task is you need to set up a public AWS S3 bucket for a static website or something like that. But yeah, a lot of times DevOps engineers do operate inside of sprints. But I also have seen, because it gets a little tough, because in Agile, like, the points matter. Like you have your things that you're supposed to do, you're supposed to finish. A lot of times, because DevOps engineers are handling the infrastructure and have to also be there to respond to problems, it kind of throws off the timing. And so there are a lot of occasions in which the DevOps engineers will work kind of in this pseudo Scrum Agile thing where they're kind of, they have 2 weeks of tasks, but like, they're also just kind of working as fast as they can constantly because of the nature of infrastructure and break fix and things like that. But yeah, you still would be working inside of that Agile pattern.
Did you operate with the Fibonacci number?
Fibonacci, yeah, I do prefer Fibonacci to t-shirt sizes or anything or something like that. So Fibonacci, for anyone who doesn't know, is it's a sequence. It's a numeric sequence where the next number in the iteration is the sum of the previous two numbers. So it's 1, 2, 3, 5, 8,
right.
13. And so what's good about Fibonacci is so these are used to size up the scope, the difficulty of a task, of a story. And so, if I'm given a task, like I said, to create that VPC, we may decide that this thing is a 5 on our rating scale. Pretty arbitrary. Your team will calibrate to each other, but whatever. The reason why I like Fibonacci is because when you t-shirt sizes, which is like large, small, extra large, there's a linear progression of difficulty. I like that Fibonacci has, that ascending level of difficulty. Like a 13 is much bigger than an 8, and that's one step up.
Yeah,
like it's a lot bigger than an 8, which is a lot bigger step up from a 5. So I like it personally, but it still can get tough, but I do enjoy it.
So yeah, I enjoy it too, especially when you have those retrospective meetings and you talk about how your sprint actually went. Now, for me, you mentioned something earlier about a traditional DevOps, a software developer being in DevOps versus like a system administrator or network engineer. The software developer has an advantage. And I think you're 100% right. The thing that I found when I was in my sprints was that I became a better software developer, or I became let's say I don't want to say became a better software developer because that's not my trait, but I actually picked up the software development mindset, I would say, because they're operating from a planning, non-reactive mindset when it comes to the sprints. And if you're coming from operations, you're very reactive. So how do you make that shift?
Oh man, you hit the nail on the head for sure. And that is the advantage. It is interesting because it is hard to infrastructure is hard to deal with. You need to kind of have that experience. You need to have touched the things to know what to do with it. So a software developer coming straight into it is not just going to be better, but I do think that, like I said, to have the advantage. How do you gain that? How do you approach that when you come from an ops side of things? Honestly, I think it's very difficult to do until you see the way a DevOps engineer who has the software developer mindset, a little more of a software development mindset, until you see how they approach things, I found it difficult to see the value in it or how to think about these things. And again, it is to me, I was always like, cool, I'll do this. And if it breaks, I'll fix it. Like if it breaks, I'll fix it. But that approach to automation where it's like, no. I can do all the things right up front with this code to make sure that I never have to interact with this thing again. And it's definitely a different way. It's 100% a different way of thinking. And it is, I think it's difficult to do until you are introduced to someone who has that mindset, or you get to work with someone who has that mindset. But I think for anyone who's not fortunate enough to do that, I think the best way to do it is to every time you're going to implement a solution, take a step back for a second and think about the. I'm a big fan of make it work, make it right, make it fast. So hey, I don't care how gross the code is, make it work first, then make it right, then make it fast. I think that to get to the point where that's okay, you first have to take a step back and don't just make it work, and you have to take a little bit more time thinking about how to make it right when you're trying to switch that mindset over. Personally, I don't know if there's any amazing way to do it, but hopefully you're fortunate enough to work with someone who does have that mindset.
Okay, so we talked about DevOps, we talked about Agile, we talked about Linux being pretty much the foundation of it all. And you mentioned Python as a coding language to learn. What language did you start with, and how did you improve your code?
I started with Python, and what helped, I went to Python first. I went to Python, and then once I realized, like in my head, Bash wasn't a programming language. The things that I was doing in Bash wasn't coding.
Right.
And then so once I realized, I was like, oh, like okay, I'm learning Python. Okay, there's variables. I know variables, and there's loops, and like okay, I do loops. And there's conditionals. There's if and greater than, less than. I was like, okay. And then once I saw that stuff, I was like, oh, okay. All these challenges that I'm seeing in Python, let me try to do them in Bash because I know Bash. Well, let me be clear, I knew Bash. I'm not the greatest Bash person right now, but I was able to like do things very quickly, and I was like, okay, all right, this is programming. Like this is implementing logic and automation. So once I was able to do that, once I was able to lean on something that I was already had some skills in, I was able to apply that into Python. The way that I got better at it was was honestly not until I inserted myself very uncomfortably into solutions at work that I probably shouldn't have been doing. I was even inserting myself on the application side. Like I'll never forget one of the first things I had to do was I was like, all right, let me get in on this app side of things. Let me go ahead and change the colors on this React Google map. Let me make this more accessible. Cool. I know CSS. I've seen it. I got this. When I tell you, I spent half a sprint trying to change 3 colors on a map and trying to wrap my head around what the heck was going on with React. It was crazy. But in that pursuit, in spending a week trying to learn how to change the colors, I learned 40,000 topiks when I was just trying to figure out what the heck was going on. Now they weren't immediately applicable, but I picked them all up. And learning's not linear. Like learning this stuff is not linear. You don't learn this thing and this thing and then this thing. Yeah, you are building, you're putting more tools in your tool belt, but everyone gets different tools at different times, and that's okay. And so I being thrust into it really did help. Everyone says work on projects and things. Again, it's hard to know what projects and things to work on. And I think the best way, what did accelerate that is that I had people to work with. That's why I said I don't think anyone should spend too much time trying to learn all this alone. Like, I don't think you should approach learning software alone. I think you need to have a community around you. I think you need to be able to interact with people, to ask questions. And I think that'll always accelerate your learning.
Yes. That's a great point. So when I mentioned how I got better at code, a part of my sprints, I'm gonna mention two things that really helped me improve. The first is the pain of unit testing. Like, that is that's harder to learn than Python. Let's start there. How did you have the unit test, which I'm sure you did? How did you learn it in Python?
Great question. Unit test. So we had, and I'm not joking, and one day I'm going to have him on my channel. I would love to introduce you to him. I'm not sure there's someone more passionate about testing than this guy. His name is Alex. He taught me so much about testing as a discipline, period. And without him, I don't think I would have ever properly wrapped my head around properly testing your code. It is difficult. It's very difficult to do well. It's not difficult to write a test, but it's very difficult to make the test meaningful.
Right.
And I had guidance. I had proper guidance in this aspect, and I'm telling you right now, I tried to learn test-driven development before, and like I tried to understand what unit testing was, and because I wasn't a software developer, I didn't even understand. I didn't really understand why we were doing what we were doing. I was like, man, look, if the code works, it works. That's the testing. like if I run it and it works, that's the test. Like, what am I doing this for? And I think this is one of those things where until you get to work on a project that you need to work, that needs to operate properly, it's hard to understand how and why to do these things. And then I also had the reference of developers who knew how to do this. So I would just go look at all the other unit tests and I would copy one and then modify it slightly. Right. And like, is this a good test? And then we would peer review it and they would tell me whether, like, why or why not it's a good test. And so again, that learning together type thing, I got to soak in the knowledge of others. Testing is hard. Unit testing is hard. Writing tests is difficult to do well.
I'm glad you brought up peer review, because that's the second thing that made me a better software developer. Can you talk about the concept of peer review and how that plays a role in DevOps?
Yeah, so peer review is very, very important. Peer review is being quite literally reviewed by your peers, having your work reviewed by your peers. Now, this is something that's absolutely it's uncomfortable, or it can be uncomfortable. It can be very uncomfortable. You do your thing, and now you have someone who comes along and possibly rips it apart. And possibly says, hey, the direction you took with this wasn't good, and these are the reasons why I believe that. And it's your opportunity to have discussions about your work and why you did what you did. And sometimes the problem is, especially when you're starting out, you don't know why you did what you did. You did it because when you Googled it, it said this would work. And when you ran it, it worked. It worked. And so a lot of times going into peer reviews in the beginning can be tough because you don't have that context. You don't have enough knowledge to know why you made this decision over another decision. But that's something that you start to get out of these, that discomfort that you go through sometimes. And again, it's not always uncomfortable, but having someone else look at your work and think through what you've done and look through what you've done can be super valuable. Everyone's not great at it, but it can be super valuable. And I think the biggest thing you win out of it is, again, you start to have to explain the whys of what you did. And once you can explain your whys, that's when you're great. That's when you will get all the jobs. That's when me personally, I think that's when you've made it. When you can explain the whys of what you've done is when you're good. And it's a good practice to do so.
Right. When I really first started coding, and I would document, and my documentation would be longer than my code. And since we're talking about this subject, your code should tell you exactly its intent, and your documentation should kind of complement that. And how do you get good at documenting your code?
I almost want to step out on a limb and say nobody in the world is good at documenting their code. Um, I think that it is the only way to get good at documenting code is to be intentional about it. It's the only way is to be very intentional about documenting your code. Um, it's something that most people don't do well. There are a lot of tools in place to make it easier for you to do so, but it is very difficult. And I think that you become good at it if again being intentional. If you're able to keep it at the forefront of what you do, I think you're good at it. I think most people start a project, begin to document, and then slowly just less and less and less until you're not documenting anything. Is kind of how it goes. And so I think only way to be good at it is to be intentional about it.
Okay. Thank you for that. Now, we were talking, you mentioned stories and you mentioned tasks when it comes to your sprints. Platforms like Jira's, Epics, all of that. There's something else, and I can't think of it. When you need to learn something, what is that called that you can take out?
Say that one more time. When you need to learn
Let's say,
something,
right? You were working on your code and you were trying to change the colors on that React, and when you're learning that learning process, which is the third way of DevOps, the continuous learning, there's actually a step in the sprint that you can use for that. What is that called?
we use spikes.
Spikes. That's it.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. It just totally
all good.
Right. So spikes, right? The thing that I love about DevOps compared to traditional operations is that continuous learning and being able to take out a spike, which says, okay, for this amount of time, I'm learning this and I'm going to document and tell you what I've learned. Can you kind of talk about that?
Yeah, spikes are really important. A lot of times, so you do something called backlog grooming. Well, it used to be called grooming. The industry is kind of trying to move it towards the word refinement. So backlog refinement, where you kind of take the things that the product owner says, hey, we need to develop these things, these features, and you dive into them. You understand what has to happen, what to do. A lot of times you're going to get to these things and you're like, bro, I have no idea what to do here. Like the whole team's gonna be like, we don't know what to do here. Like you're like, I don't know. And so what you'll do before you can properly estimate that, you'll say, cool, we're going to do a spike on this. We're going to take some time. We're going to usually it's time boxed to maybe you have 2 days of learning or something, maybe you have a day or hours or whatever, however your team wants to do it, and you go and you dive into learning about this thing and to exploring this thing as much as you can for the allotted amount of time. Usually you want to take notes. Usually the outcome of it is notes and some documentation. Sometimes it's a recommendation. Sometimes you'll do a spike to say, hey, which one of these, dive into these 3 different products to determine which one, to make a recommendation on which one we might go with in the future. And so you take that. Spikes are the best. I really do love spikes. They're pretty beneficial. I'm gonna give you all who are working on agile teams a little word of advice. What you can do is, a lot of times especially if your product owner is external to your company, they usually don't like spikes because spikes are not a direct feature to the user, to the end user. It is not something that's useful to the end user. So what you do is you start to get real loose with your estimations and include the spike in the point value. So you're the subject matter expert on these things. And if they tell you to go do something that you have no idea how to do, and they might start looking it up and you might be like, okay, like I know I need to dig in this amount of things. Like, cool, this might really be a 3, but hey, today, man, it's a 13. Yep. And so they'll start to feel like, they'll be like, okay, you said it's a 13, I guess it's a 13. And you can kind of squeeze those spikes inside of there. It might make the product owner feel a little bit better because now there's points associated with it. A lot of times people don't put points on spikes, but you can kind of use it how you may. But if you're not getting enough spike time, if your team's not giving you enough spike time, point those things a little bit higher and take a little time to spike within it. Is my recommendation. Right,
because the total of like your Fibonacci number in your sprint, what is that? Velocity? Is that your velocity?
Velocity, yep.
Yeah, so that's the total number. This says however many tasks or however many points of your Fibonacci number that you deliver in that 1 week or 2 week period. So I like that, what you just said.
Yep. And you can pad it. Velocity is usually calculated over time. So like, you can start to slowly make your velocity seem even higher by like, all right, I was doing, 3 5-point tickets a sprint, and now I'm doing 3 13-point tickets a sprint because look, man, I wanted some time to learn in there, and I needed it. You might need it, and so just think about it.
Yeah, the more you deliver, the more they trust you on your team, and the wiser you will get in your approach. I like that tip that you just gave everybody.
Yep.
All right, so
learn it the hard way.
Yes, definitely. Now, getting back to DevOps, what are, let's say, the top tools, or what do people need to know if they want to become a DevOps engineer?
All right. Right now, at this point in time, Linux. So I usually don't explicitly say Linux, because I think that for most things in tech right now, I think it's a foundational thing. So yes, Linux, but I'm not even going to really include that. Cloud and containers right now will get you into DevOps. Right now, your fastest way into DevOps right now is cloud and containers. So Docker, especially Kubernetes, but these can be big topics to learn. Definitely cloud, like learn a cloud provider. Doesn't matter if it's AWS or Azure. Well, it doesn't matter if it's AWS or Azure. Choose one. AWS has more roles available. And more market share, but Azure, because they have less market share, they're still very large. Their jobs generally pay more because engineers are generally harder to find, because not quite as many people are in the pool. So choose one of them. Google, great. Google Cloud is great, but there just aren't nearly as many jobs. So me personally, if you're going to dive into one to get started, AWS or Azure, I think it's super beneficial to learn Docker. You can absolutely get a role without Docker. If you're not going to learn Docker, if you don't want to go the container route, the other route right now, I think, is to dive into some type of cloud provisioning tool, like Terraform or AWS CDK, but then make sure you're in AWS. But yeah, I think cloud and containers are my go-to right now to tell people to start with to get a role in DevOps.
Man, I'm glad you mentioned Terraform. I really like Terraform. People have been talking a lot about Ansible, right? And for good reason. It's a good configuration management tool. But the ease of use of Terraform, I am in love with.
Yeah, I mean, and they're not you can use them both, depending on your setup. Terraform is the provisioner. Use that to actually get the infrastructure you want, and then use Ansible to configure those things afterwards. But yeah, I mean, Terraform's absolutely it's a game changer. It's not the only tool out there, but the implementation of it's special. It's easy to use. It makes sense.
Yeah.
And I think it's definitely changed the way, again, you think about development. The way you think about managing doing your ops. It truly has changed the way you do systems and you manage your machines.
Thank you. So let me ask you this. I'm not sure if you know this, but does it matter where you're located when it comes to the cloud? Like which one you should learn? Does that matter?
On which one? So no, I don't think so. I don't think it matters, again, for your level for all aspects of learning. The cloud is I think whatever platform you go with, you can learn the concepts of the cloud. What you're really learning when you go to the cloud is really how to properly work with distributed computing on a massive scale. And really there are concepts that exist amongst all cloud platforms. I don't think it matters where you go if your goal is to just learn. But again, for entry into the industry, if you're trying to get a role, again, I think you can go a couple different routes. You can either specialize with one of the smaller cloud platforms like Google. So I do think you can find jobs making more money going Google Cloud or Azure, because there are less engineers. Supply and demand, there's just less engineers kind of going in that space. But there are many more. There's such a massive amount of jobs in AWS right now, just because they have some absurd market share. I haven't seen the latest graph, but I mean, but I don't think it matters which one you learn. I think the concepts work across the board.
You just said something that I really found interesting, and I want to kind of peel this onion back. You said that when it comes to Azure, the pool is smaller. You coming from a system administration background, with so many system administrators that were Windows focused, how is that possible?
It's possible because I think it's possible because of the direction people had to change when talking about scale. And Amazon had a head start. Amazon was the first to kind of publicly, we're going to get this out to everybody, not just enterprises. We're going to democratize this for everybody. And they got to get a lot of feedback, and they got to get the products that were most useful to people out a lot quicker. And I think that there's been a little bit of an exodus in originally in moving away from Windows, .NET framework stuff, all that, because it is a lot harder to scale when it comes to Windows servers, just because of the nature of how they run. And so I think there were some issues there. I think I'm not joking. I think the direct contributing factor for Microsoft going so big into open source and to making the .NET Core open source and actually putting it on Linux and doing all that is because they realized that in the cloud, Linux is going to reign supreme in the cloud. It was always going to reign supreme in the cloud, and they had to. And so I think that's also part of the reason why they're catching up so quickly now. They pivoted quickly. And so, yes, there are plenty of places that still need Windows systems and need these things. And so Microsoft, for the most part, they have them. Amazon has it as well, but most people are going to go to Microsoft for those things. But now Azure has just about everything else that Amazon has to offer for most people, and access to those things. And I was surprised at it at first as well. They also didn't go to the world first. They went, Microsoft, as they usually do, went to enterprises first, and just wasn't able to capture quite the same market because they were late, and they went enterprise first.
Okay. All right. Ebo Yasin asked a question about DevOps not being entry level. Is it or is it not? Could you?
It's not. I mean, so it's a good question, and it is a tough answer. And so we actually had a conversation about this. First off, what's up, A? I appreciate it, man. That's a good question. We have this question every year at DevOps Days. So DevOps Days, pretty dope conference if you're looking to talk DevOps all around the world, really. But DevOps Days Baltimore, we're having a conversation about this, and what we determined after years of having this conversation is that DevOps, there's no JV in DevOps. There's no JV team in DevOps. The entry level side of DevOps, it's tough because this is something I left out of the definition I told you from Nathan Harvey in the beginning. But what the last line of it is that it's a cultural movement, designed to help our organizations move as quickly as they need to, but it's born from the experiences of its practitioners. That was the last piece of it, and so it is just because of the sheer scale of what you are expected to perform in DevOps. It's very difficult to walk into a DevOps role at the entry level. You just have to know too much. You have to be the arbiter of the entire software development life cycle. Like usually you're the only one who knows the whole thing. Usually you're the only one who has insight into all of the pieces, and it's just difficult to do. It's not to say that you can't walk right into one, but usually you have to step into another role first. Usually, like while you're picking up these things, you grab a software role in the meantime, or grab a systems administrator role and kind of get up some skills there as you're picking some stuff up and start to supplement it elsewhere. It's not really, generally not an entry level role. I think it'll be tough for anyone to do.
Okay. I'm glad you said that, and we're going to kind of build on that. I got a question on Twitter. I'm going to put it on the screen.
Cool.
It's from DJ Lou Ali 502. And the question is, how do you get started in DevOps? Which I think you mentioned that And what are the best certifications to have for you to get hired?
Yeah. How do you get started in DevOps? It's to dive into both automation and systems. So I dive into the cloud. I'm serious about it. Dive into the cloud. Dive into automating the cloud. Certifications can be tough in DevOps. The only ones that cloud certs right now are valuable. They are valuable right now. I absolutely would recommend getting a cloud cert. I think it's super helpful for getting your foot in the door. I've come across so many organizations who require it for things because there are benefits and there are things that Amazon provides to organizations who are partnered who have a certain amount of certified people, things like that. So I definitely think the cloud certifications are great. The only other certifications that I really think are valuable in the DevOps space right now might be HashiCorp certs are new. So Terraform, like those are pretty new. I'm not sure that those are valuable yet, but the Kubernetes certs, the CKA, the Certified Kubernetes Administrator is valuable, very valuable right now. But again, I think for someone, it's always weird for me to advise that, because if you're someone who's trying to get into DevOps, I don't recommend that you go try to get a CKA at all. You simply won't have the context to fully understand what you're learning. And I don't think it'll be useful, and I think it'll be very hard for you to get. But yeah, I think cloud certs and maybe the CKA are the only real valuable certs that I think of right now that people are getting and that companies are really looking at specifically for DevOps engineers. Yeah.
What about Linux certifications and Python certifications?
I didn't even know there were Python ones. I heard you say it one day on a video and I had to go look it up. So that was completely new to me. I don't know yet. Like I said, I personally haven't seen any organizations who are looking for something like that. Linux. So because the term DevOps and SREs, they're being used so ubiquitously and so universally across the market. I think there are a lot of systems administration roles where your Linux certs can be valuable. They can be a tool. I'm not sure that I would spend like the RHCSA is a difficult test. Right. Was the LPIC or whatever, the Linux right. It's also not super easy. And I think that your efforts might be valuable elsewhere first. But again, definitely a tool that can be valuable. But I think on the whole, it's not generally a recommendation of mine.
Okay, but before we move on to site reliability engineer, is this traditional system administrator? Let me start over. Is the traditional system administrator going away?
Yes. I'm not now. That's not to say it's going to become an extinct thing. It is shrinking. That the need for a traditional system administrator is shrinking. There will always be needs. There will always be a need for traditional sysadmins. Absolutely, but those roles will shrink. Those roles will shrink. And a lot of that has to do with the DevOps ethos of systems no longer being kept around for long. They're no longer pets. I know it's super morbid, but they're no longer pets now. Especially with the cloud, they've moved towards a cattle-like philosophy, and so the traditional ops role is definitely gonna dwindle. Still gonna be around, but it's gonna be a lot harder to get. And I think they're also gonna start to morph a little bit. People are still gonna call DevOps engineers and cloud engineers. They're gonna call them systems administrators a lot of times in job recs too. So if you're looking for a job, look for all of them: sysadmin, cloud engineer, DevOps, SRE. Look for all of them because there's a lot of overlap there. But I do think the role is shrinking, but I don't think it'll go away.
Okay. Last question around this topic. Then I'm gonna get some shout outs in the chat because I appreciate everybody that's commenting. and I thank all the moderators. Do you need to go to college to become a DevOps engineer?
Absolutely not. Well, did you have more to that question? I'll tell you why, but yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you have to bring up college because people still think college is let me not say it like that. People still look at college as an option to get in DevOps, to get in IT. What are your thoughts around that?
So I am not a college basher. I'm not someone who's like, no, don't go to college. I am someone who believes that college is generally not a good idea for a vast majority of people entering the industry. For a vast majority, one is it's extremely expensive, and because of the way that traditional education works, they simply can't give you, tech moves too fast for them to properly give you what you need in something like DevOps. I absolutely think, like, absolutely not. I would not go to college to become a DevOps engineer. I think it is. I think you would come out wildly underdeveloped as a DevOps engineer. There's just too many tools. There's too many different things that you have to learn, ways of doing things that you have to learn that I don't think that you can learn in an institution. To be honest, again, it's all about context. The best DevOps engineers are coming from places where, like, you have to. It's best to be a part of the things, even at a much lower level. Being a part of the things, even if you're being a part of things as a designer, maybe you're a designer trying to move into something like this. Being a part of the process and understanding the pain points and all the stuff, like, any way you can be a part of the process as a business analyst, wherever, is, I think, better for your career in DevOps than college. But again, I'm not a college bastard. I think there are things that are good about it. I think for software engineers, I think there can be value in college. I don't think you're going to come out job ready, but I think that once you pick up the remaining skills to make you job ready, I think that because you have that underlying foundation, I think that it sets you up to be a better programmer much faster, and to accelerate your career a little bit faster. But I think that's specifically around software, because that's a lot more theory. There's a lot more theory involved in that. But for DevOps, absolutely not. Do not go to college to become a DevOps engineer. I think it'll be a waste of your money and time.
Awesome. For those of you that are just tuning in, I have Aaron Brooks, who's the CEO of MasterMnd, which is a technical talent pipeline company that's focused on training DevOps engineers and SREs. Now, we've been talking about DevOps. We kind of broke it down. So if you missed the whole understanding of what DevOps, Agile, and Aaron's background, please watch the replay. We thank you all for tuning in. Shout out to everybody in the chat. At this point, we're going to kind of talk about how to become an SRE, which is a site reliability engineer. And I think it's going to become a huge job title in 2021. It's already gaining momentum. What's your thoughts around that, Aaron?
Facts, big facts. SREs, if you go to, feel free, everyone, to go to Glassdoor or wherever you look up salaries, and look up the salaries in your area or across the country for DevOps. You probably go there, you're like, oh, this is good money. This is really good money. And people talk highly of it. Then look at SREs, and the money is higher. The roles are generally a little more substantial. But yeah, I think that absolutely site reliability engineering is going to be a big thing, because it was born out of like Google and like the way that they've done things. Because people have learned how to adopt the cloud better. They've had years of developing these robust distributed systems. The need for site reliability engineering is definitely going to skyrocket. I think it's going to be pretty big as we move into the future.
Okay, for those that may not know what a site reliability engineer is, what they do, and how does it differ from a DevOps engineer, I know I just gave you a lot to kind of unpack. Take your time, and can you kind of break that down?
Yeah. So there's tons of overlap. Like if you're looking at a Venn diagram of a DevOps engineer and an SRE and a systems administrator, there's a bunch of overlap there. But whereas the focus of the DevOps engineer is the delivery of the code, it's really focused on the applications side of things, and being able to push code through pipelines and build those pipelines up. Site reliability engineering is more focused on the reliability of the systems. It is a little more. It falls more on the ops side of things. In thinking, not in implementation, but in thinking, it falls more on the thinking about the way that these systems can be robust. How do we keep things running? How do we keep things going? But while also moving quickly and delivering code and building all of these things. And so really the difference is there's a super popular video about this on YouTube, but they say that, DevOps it's a whole thing, but as an SRE, you might implement the class DevOps to be able to do your job. So you might implement a bunch of DevOps methodologies, and you might implement CI/CD and stuff to make things work. But the goal is different. The goal isn't that delivery of software. It is the reliability and the robustness of systems. These are the people who are on call. Like the site reliability engineers are the people who are responding. You do a lot more responding to system issues and making sure all of the things are working properly. Also, site reliability engineers the term is generally only introduced at relative scale. Let us it usually has to do when you're dealing with big systems generally, and so that's kind of where it comes into play. I found it super interesting because I went to a Google Sandbox event, and they have a different. They took us through a little example problem, and the types of problems that you experience when you are a worldwide company at the scale that Google's at, they're different.
Yeah.
They're way different than the things that most of us have experienced. And I thought I had worked at big companies. I was like, man, no, like they're just way different. And we went through a thing and we all implemented our own solutions. And I was like, my solution's amazing, like so good. And then we talked about it. The guy was like, yeah, like this would be a great solution if this and this and this weren't a problem because of the scale. And I was like, oh my gosh, my brain can't even think about those things. And so it's pretty interesting. But I think that the scary part of SRE is SREs do implement a lot of software, generally implement a lot of software to solve these problems. They generally write a lot of code to solve these systems issues and solve these scale issues, and so it can be a little daunting to dive into it.
I'm glad you brought that up. So the difference, is it safe to say that the difference between a site reliability engineer and a DevOps engineer is the fact that the site reliability engineer focuses a lot more on automating everything, or as much as possible?
Yes, and I do think that's a tenet of DevOps. But I think yes, it's the focus. I think the main difference is the focus. Whereas the focus of the DevOps engineer is on the development of the application, and I think that the focus of the site reliability engineers is on the focus of the systems as a whole, including those applications. It's the system as a whole versus development. Again, a lot of you probably sit out there like, oh, but like I'm a DevOps engineer, I work on the whole systems. Yeah, I told you, like everyone uses these terms ubiquitously, and like there's tons of overlap there for sure.
So if for those that want to become a site reliability engineer, what skills do you recommend?
Yeah, and so I think for SREs, generally you do want to dive deeper. I think you want to dive deeper into the system. So I think you need to know Linux much more in depth than a traditional DevOps engineer would need to know networks much more. Like you need to understand, these things at scale. It was interesting because one of the problems that they were talking about was like he was like asking me like if I knew like the max amount of IOPS on a ZFS system, or like I was like, bro, I don't even know the words you're saying to me. I don't. Why would you think that's something that I would be able to pull off the top of my head? But for a lot of companies, you kind of needed to be a little bit more in depth in the way the systems works, like really understanding that, and then software. I think for a lot of SRE roles, at least what I'm finding out now, is you are either super strong at infrastructure and have a really good handle on software development, or a lot of the roles now, SRE roles, are people who are just bomb at Kubernetes as well. So one or the other, but I think you need to be super in depth with a system. I would say learn systems really well, learn how to learn software much more than you do now. I think it's done at a higher level than the automation that might be done in a normal DevOps role.
So is it safe to say that the SRE is more on architecture of the whole organization rather than a DevOps engineer is one functionality inside of the organization?
Yes. Yeah, I think that's fair. And again, that's why SREs implement they can implement DevOps methodologies, but their focus is much broader, I think. And I think you hit it right on the head.
Okay. So in SRE, they need to know coding. They need to know the infrastructure. If someone wants to get in DevOps, become an SRE, should they go to a smaller organization or the biggest organization possible?
This is a good one. I think you should go to. I think it's going to be both easier. I think it's going to be easier to get into a larger organization, and there will be people to learn from at a larger organization. When it comes and I say this specifically when it comes to DevOps and SRE, you'll generally get chances a little bit more at larger organizations because they have the infrastructure to support you a little bit. The problem is for larger organizations, things are broken up a lot more. Like they might have an SRE team for each little piece. Like your SRE team might only hold a relatively small piece of the entire system, and so sometimes it's not always super conducive to your learning. I think the issue when you work at a smaller company is you're generally responsible for much more and for architecting much more. And that is very difficult to do when you don't have the background. Like having someone come to you as a subject matter expert and being like, look, we need to very rapidly implement this this solution. So I'll give you a real world example. When COVID went down, my role, I was the technical lead for an application team that managed the digital footprint of the Small Business Administration of the United States of America. And literally, they were getting updates about what was going on from press conferences on TV. And so when they were like, cool, we got all these PPP loans. We got all these loans we're going to give out to small businesses. We were finding out and getting calls in the middle of the night like, hey, y'all, it's legally required that we're able to take in and process millions of loan applications in 3 days. And it's like, whoa, where's this coming from? And having to, working at I worked at a smaller software company, but that had the contract with SBA, like having to be a part of the, of making those decisions. Oh man, even just a year ago would have been extremely overwhelming for me. And I think these are the types of things that happen when you're a small company. Maybe not on that scale, but you're asked to do much to solve all the problems, and I think that can be much harder when you are early on. Definitely starting out and early on. So, I think it's easier to get in bigger companies, and I think it's a little bit safer. But I think you'll learn more at smaller companies just because you get to touch much more of it. This is a common thing with Capital One as well. Capital One they do a lot of really good engineering, but because they're so massive, like people get in and get bored kind of fast. At least that's what I've heard. People get in and get bored pretty fast because they're working with such a small piece of the system as a whole.
Man, you just broke down so much. All right, the Phoenix Project, the example that you gave, like, for those of you that don't understand what he's talking about when it comes to DevOps, if you're getting a request to process that many applications, that isn't just upgrading a server. That's infrastructure. That's a whole lot of pieces. Can you kind of talk about that as so they can understand the scale and how DevOps plays a role in that?
Yeah. So one, when you have a short amount of time to deliver these things, we're talking about a couple of different things. One, we're talking about an application. We're talking about an application that people can upload forms to. Great. That doesn't sound on its own. That doesn't sound very difficult. But then you take into all this data has personal PII, personally identifiable information. So there's tons of security concerns. And so now we're thinking about infrastructure. We're like, where did these things go? What are the requirements for the transmission of this data when we do accept it into this form? How do we create and host a form that can take literally millions of submissions? People are going to be berating this thing. They're going to be bombarding this application. How do we scale this? How do we make this scalable to as many people? Because we're talking about people's livelihoods here. People need these things. How do you do that? So luckily, we're fortunate enough. We're like, hey, AWS, hey, come on over here, man. We gotta work directly with y'all because this is crazy. Like this is out of control. And luckily, that was super helpful. But like, you're talking about scale. You're talking about building an application itself. You're talking about building a pipeline so that obviously there are going to be bugs. Obviously, there are going to be small things that need to be moved into this. There are going to be features that need to be rapidly added. So in this amount of time, it's like, okay, also, how do we develop the pipeline so that this thing can be developed on quickly? Like we shouldn't have to take out 2 hours out of our day to be able to do a deployment. Like this stuff it has to move. It has to move. So you're thinking about these things as well. How to automate it. What tools can we use to do this the most efficiently? Like, yeah, we might have the tools we like the best, but what tools are going to allow us to do this, as efficiently as possible? And also like taking into account what skill set do you have on the team? Like the best tools are not always the best tools if you don't have the proper skill set to use them. Like yeah, okay, maybe a Ferrari is the fastest car you like in your whole area, but you're gonna lose a race with that Ferrari if you don't know how to drive a Ferrari. Like if you're not ready to drive a Ferrari, don't drive the Ferrari. And so you got to take into account all of those things, and it's rough and it's very scary to do without the experiences of the practitioners. It can be very scary to do.
Man, I can only imagine how much stress that probably was to get done. How did you were you stressed, and how did you manage that?
Very, very, very stressed. But we were working 14-hour days for weeks. But I will say, I think I was super fortunate in this aspect where everyone else was dealing with being quarantined and the struggles of those. Like I was thrown into my work.
Right.
And it kind of took my mind off of a lot of things. But the stress was high, but also I think what was helpful is one, I've been in not situations quite this large, but I had been in large scale situations before where we had things go wrong or we had to do something like this quickly. So I'm pretty comfortable under pressure. But two, once you get into it, and you realize hey man, everybody can only do what they can do. Like you can only do what you can do. Lean on what you know as much as possible. When you don't know, ask for help. It is okay. Once I saw someone who I thought had all the answers be like, oh no, we need to call in help. We need to I don't know the answer to this. Like call in help. I was like, oh, then I'll speak. Like it was like cool. Then I'm no longer afraid. I'm not stressed because if I don't know, especially in this instance, man, say we don't know, so we all as a team can figure out how to go find this answer. But again, it was helpful because it wasn't just me. There were a small team of us, but we kind of leaned on each other to kind of get through that. We shared the pressure. And again, you're a team. Whenever things like this happen, we were helping out with all kinds of stuff. I was helping out with design. I was helping out, you help out where you can help out. I think that's the best way to get over the pressures of something like that is realize, man, it ain't the end of the world to be honest. Like it can be hurtful for some. Tech is important. That is also what made me realize how important technology is, to be honest. I think I underestimated, I didn't understand how valuable technology was to people's lives, and they really put it in perspective for me. But I don't know. At the end of the day, lean on the people around you. Don't be afraid to get help with things, and you'll make it through eventually. Most of the time.
Man, my man, I appreciate that advice. Back in March when all of this kicked off, I was going through my own stuff because at the time I was working for a software development company that supports hospitals around the country, right? And so when it all happened, like hospitals needed to scale out their networks, and scaling out their networks is new VPNs, that new IP addresses, new routes, new access lists, new firewalls, all of these pieces that needed to be implemented. It was very stressful, and I found myself working, like you said, 14, 16-hour days, to get it done. And I mean, I'm not leaving the house. There's nowhere to go.
Nowhere to go.
Yeah, and it made me better, and it also made me appreciate life. You know what I mean? Because at 100%. Any moment, it's not promised.
100%, man. I said, I really had a coming to Jesus moment during that time, man. It was like, man, like us as technical practitioners, the money, you care about the money, you care about you care about these things. A lot of us do it to feed our families, whatever. But I'm telling you, man, it's crazy how the work that you did there was genuinely helping to save lives and to build up the infrastructure to help people out of a terrible situation. And it's changed the way that I've looked at like what our responsibility is in tech pretty greatly, and it's actually been a pretty big driving factor to some of the back end things that we're going to be trying to do here in the coming months.
Man, hey, you're doing great things, man. Like you really do inspire me. You're a passionate person about what you do. I admire the fact that you were ahead of where we are today, and that you're stepping out on your own, and that you're helping as many people as you can. You put in the time, you put in the work. I salute you for that, bro.
I appreciate that, man. And you absolutely, I think I told you this before when you hopped on my channel, which I appreciate. But I'm not joking. I would not, I think I'm not sure that I would be doing this unless I saw people like you. Like I found your channel before I started doing all of it, and it was one of the inspiring things. I was like, hey, maybe I can share what I know online somehow, like some way, somehow. And so I got to see the community built, and I started seeing #lab every day all the time, and I was like, yo, this is dope. Like build, like I love this community building. And so I also appreciate you being a big inspiration to me as well.
Man, I'm a strong believer in inspiration and planting seeds. A lot of people look for mentors, and they look for that thing. They look for that person to help them out of the pain that they're going through, to help them point them in the right direction. And I think a lot of times, being as long as I've been in IT, as long as I've been living, I look at the situation where I overlooked something somebody said to me, something I saw, something I read in a book. That one thing, I often overlook it, but then I come back to it like, dang, that really inspired me and helped me get to here, and I didn't appreciate it when that person was here or when that person was in my life. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Nah, I definitely, I feel you. I feel you on that one, man.
Yeah. I like what you're doing. Now, I got a question. For people that are going into the new year, what advice do you have for them that are trying either to get into technology or advance their career? Can you kind of help both of those people out?
One, that's a pretty good setup for me, but I'm gonna throw two things at you though. First, the real genuine practical thing is one, to move, to do it, to I know Everyone sets their goals and things at the start of the new year. Everyone wants to change. Everybody wants to change their lives. We all get on a road. We have something we want to do, and then inevitably, a vast majority of us fall off of it. I what did I say? It takes 21 days to develop a habit. One, don't stress too much about where to start. Start somewhere and do your best to commit to doing something reasonable for an extended period of time. Make sure you get to that first month. Don't take on too much. You don't need to be doing this 8 hours a day. It really is completely okay to hey, if I can do, let me first set aside 3 hours this week. Do you know how much you can learn in 3 hours of something that you don't know? If you can watch 3 hours of Linux, you in 3, like you would be floored at how much you learn in 3 hours. Make sure that you start to take into account what you've learned. So I really want you to, as you're learning things, to take some time and start to just recite the things that you know. Just write down what you learned in these 3 days. And when you look back at the things that you learned, like a lot of times we don't spend time looking at how far we've come. We only focus on how far we got to go. And that can be super problematic and super discouraging. And it kind of sucks. 2, don't be hard on yourself at all. The stuff's hard. Like tech isn't like the most difficult thing in the world, but when you're trying to dive into something like this, it can be tough. So don't be too hard on yourself. If you are having trouble getting through a concept, move on to something else. Try taking a look at something else. Try to learn it from someone else. Watch 10 different videos on it. Okay, if I need to move away from it, maybe now is not the right time for me to get this exact thing. I'll pick up some other stuff in the meantime. Learning's not linear, like I said before, so that's okay. Move on to the next thing. It is okay if you didn't figure out this one piece before going to the next piece. Just because this tutorial you went to said you need to learn these things in this order doesn't mean you need to learn it in that order at all. So just going to the new year, seriously, very practically, you gotta just do it. You gotta just spend a little time, be kind to yourself and just kind of get it done. But if you really are trying to extend yourself to try to change your career, try to get further in your career, we're hosting 3 completely free journeys. We call them journeys. They're boot camps. They're 8 weeks. One is Decoded. It's a journey into software engineering and computer science. So if you want to come through, you're going to learn mostly Go, but you're also going to learn Python. We'll talk about day 1 why you're going to be learning Go instead of Python. But that's going to be a course if you're trying to really work on your software skills. If you're really trying to get better, that's going to be the course for that. And so these are all the apprentice level courses. So these are ground floor. You can get right in on these. The other one is Horizons, journey into cloud computing with AWS. So I've been AWS certified multiple times. I've used AWS to solve a multitude of challenges. So we're going to be diving into that as well. And the third one is called Pipeline. So this is the one that people like a lot, but it's a journey into software it's a journey into software delivery, automation, and infrastructure. And this is your DevOps SRE course. And it's really going to cover the core concepts of all of these things and really help you to start to get there. There are 3 levels to all of these courses that happen throughout the year. So once we're done with this first level, you go into the second level, which is going to be tougher and cover more things. And the third level, again, it's completely free to sign up. It is a pay what you want boot camp. The goal is to get all these companies out here to supplement what they need you. These companies need you. They need us to learn these skills, and the goal is to get them to supplement in the future. But right now, it's a pay what you want, but completely free to participate. You're going to have Google Classroom stuff. You're going to have resources, test quizzes, auto-graded assignments in GitHub Classroom. So it is a full boot camp experience, and it's done on Twitch and Discord. So if you go to academy.mastermind.io, it's in the description. Mastermind does not have an I in it. It's mastermnd.io. You can register on there. But yeah, I really do think it's a great place to come through, especially because of the community. Remember, I said I don't think you should learn these things alone. It's asynchronous communication. It's one to many, but you're learning with a community. Again, you're in the Discord, you're in the chat. There are people going through this process with you that you can communicate with at any time. You can hop right into Discord and hop into a voice channel if you need help during the stream. And so it's just a good way to dive into this stuff and to be able to grow, to be able to ask questions as you need answers. And I personally think it's a better way to learn how to do this stuff going into the new year. And, we'll help keep you accountable.
Nice. Man, I'm excited. I'm gonna hop on your live streams, support you as much as I can.
Hey man, look, one day you got to come teach me and everyone about some networking, because I've told everyone on my stream before, networking is one of my weaker. It's certainly one of my weaker disciplines. And you're gonna be bad at, you try to dive into DevOps, all this other stuff. You're gonna have some points where you're not that good, and we'd love to hear all of your knowledge about networking, because your boy struggles sometimes.
Yeah, when you mentioned VPC, that brought back flashbacks.
Hey,
You know what I mean?
me too. Me too.
Now, I want to say thank you to Mitchell Valentino for the super chat. They said that Aaron's real world experience is invaluable and inspiring. One of the best tech interviews I've ever watched. Thank you.
I appreciate that, Mitchell.
Yeah, you shed a lot of game on this, man. Now, thank you to Sugar Skull Life for the super chat. Now, this is a question I wanted to ask you as well. This question is, why Go over Python? But before you answer, you mentioned that Google Cloud is the smallest of all the clouds. So I, at that time, was wondering, okay, why are you mentioning Go if Google Cloud is the smallest?
So Google Cloud is the smallest of the big three. It's still bigger than a lot of other clouds. It's still considered one of the major cloud providers. But Go isn't just for Google Cloud. Go is it's a general purpose programming language designed for speed. It's a systems language designed for speed. It was born out of Google for sure. The reason I'll tell you now. Yeah, one of the reasons why is when you're diving into learning the concept of software engineering and computer science, when you're learning an interpreted, dynamically typed language like Python, you don't have to worry. You don't have to learn a lot of rules and skills that you would need in other languages. And yes, that's great. You can Python, you can get going quicker with Python, but you may become limited in the future. And again, like I said, there's a lot of rules that you don't know when you're dealing with Go, which is a statically typed. Those types matter, and it's a compiled language. There are a lot more rules here when you go about that. As far as statically typed languages go, Go is, to me, the easiest to write by a substantial margin, which is a huge deal, and it's also, again, fast and performant. Like things like this is the reason why computer science programs throw you into something like Java first. Java is very verbose. It's not, it's important. It's a great tool, but I don't think it's the best choice. Really, I think it would be Go, or maybe even C# might be a great first time compiled language. But again, that's in the Microsoft ecosystem. There's a little bit of nuance there into why I wouldn't want to go that route. I think that all the things you need to learn, I think Go really does super well. I think it becomes very approachable as you're trying to just run through those concepts. But again, the reason why we go over Python is because Python is dope. It's pretty simple. Python's dope. You can just it has the perfect. I think it has an almost perfect balance of simplicity and accessibility. It's on all the systems already. It is very. There's really good immediate feedback. There's a lot of instant gratification there. So when you learn how to code, if you're trying to dive into Python or just a ton of tough Go stuff, you might quit because there's not a lot of instant gratification there, or quite as instant gratification. There's more concepts that you have to learn. But Python, you can write a 3-liner and have a real application, it has logic in 3 lines.
Yeah.
And so, Python, I think it's good. I also just think it's good to go over both a static language and a dynamic language. And I think Python's the best language to do that with as well.
Yeah, what sold me on Python was the shell and the line-by-line execution. It was extremely easy to get started, extremely easy to write code, extremely easy to understand what's going on in the read. And comparable to Go, how does Go differ from, or is it pretty much the same learning curve?
I mean, yeah. So because it's compiled. It's it's not interpreted, so there's no line by line. There is a little more setup. All compiled languages have a little bit more setup to kind of get going. It's a little bit more verbose, but it does include some good features where a language like Rust or C, you would have to pre-compile your code every time before running it.
Right.
And Go it still compiles, but you can kind of just run it. It does some pseudo stuff in there. But when you talk about languages like Rust and C and C plus there are even more things that you have to worry about, like memory management and garbage collection and stuff that we just don't need. Right now, you don't need that as a good systems language. You need something that's pretty fast to write.
Right.
And so Go kind of combines the good stuff about Python and the good stuff about C to kind of make something that's not the fastest, but really fast, but pretty fast, and not the easiest to write, but also pretty easy on the scale of things. So it has a really good balance there. But yeah, I'm a big Python fan. Oh, but because you did ask why go over Python, another reason is because Python is really great for automation because it has really great implementations of tools to work with day-to-day things like CSVs and all the request package and stuff and parsing things from the web and parsing JSON and stuff. It's really good at those tasks, even system stuff, like all the OS package works. I think it particularly has really good implementation of things. So you can manage things on the system a lot easier and that's a lot of times it's things that we're trying to do in DevOps or SRE work.
That's a great point. For those of you that are getting into automation and automating in Python, like the PyPy library, it's about I don't know, over 100,000 packages that's in PyPy, and then there's about 10,000 network automation packages or something like that. So there's a ton there to get you up and running immediately. You don't have to write new code all the time. Whatever you pretty much want to do, there's probably a library out there for it or something on GitHub. And the community for Python is huge. How large is the Go community?
Oh, it's a lot smaller. It's a whole lot smaller. Like Go is it's super new in comparison to just about everything.
Okay.
I want to say 2006, 2007. That's the reason why concurrency is like people like Go for concurrency, because it was one of the only languages that we're talking about today, like that most people talk about today, that's in pretty heavy usage, that was developed after multi-core processors were available to the world. So it's a first-class citizen. You can do that stuff immediately and Go. And so the community is a lot smaller, but the community is robust. And it is absolutely an in-demand language. And if you watch all the GitHub developer surveys and stuff, go take a look. Go is at the top of the most loved. It's at the top of the most wanted to learn. And if you go look up Go developer salaries, they dwarf Python developer salaries as well. But again, a lot less jobs for sure. And Python's the universal language, man. Python is it's a juggernaut. But yeah, it's not nearly as big.
So we've been streaming for, let me say, over 102 minutes or something like that. Almost 2 hours, an hour and 45 minutes, right? For those of you that are on the stream, been watching the stream, I'm going to share what I think is going to happen next year. I think Terraform is going to be huge next year. And I think Go, which is something I've already started learning, I think is going to get more and more steam. By the end of the next year, you're going to see a lot more people making Go YouTube videos. Like that's going to be the thing by the end of next year. Go is going to be the language that people start shifting to. What's your thoughts?
No, I mean, so yeah, I think it's going to continue to grow and be much bigger. So especially for DevOps, because Go is a good systems language, but especially the DevOps space, SRE space, all of the amazing tools that you love are probably written in Go. Docker written in Go, Kubernetes written in Go, Terraform written in Go. All of the HashiCorp tools basically are written in Go. Like a lot of these amazing things are written in Go. There's actually also some pretty substantial networking things being done in Go as well, because of Go's concurrency, which is pretty interesting. I think people are switching over to Rust for that stuff nowadays though. But I do think that Go, I don't think Go's ever going to be as big as Python, ever. but I do think it's going to be a large language that you can't ignore as we kind of keep moving forward in things that we do. It just makes sense for so many people. The community is already big enough to where it's taking flight. But 100%, I think it's valuable to know. I don't think it's at the point where I'm like, oh, you need to learn Go. But I do think it would be valuable if you have the time. I do think it's valuable to learn Go.
Okay.
Yeah.
When doing software development and learning Python, at what point did you shift from writing scripts to modular code?
So pretty quickly, actually.
Okay.
And even my scripts now are written pretty modularly now for most of the time, depending on the use case. And again, it happened pretty quickly because I got to see only because I got to see examples of developers got tasked to write like, okay, cool, we got to do this basically an ETL process, but the developer's like, cool, I'll handle this. And usually that'll be something that I would do. And I would do it in Bash or I would do it in Python, but I would just write it as a script, like just run it. Hopefully it works. I'll put a little bit of error handling in there. I'll do my best, but I'm just gonna run it. I'm gonna run this. It's gonna run. And hopefully it works. And seeing the developers, how they approached it, and like getting this Python little application back, really, that was intended to be used as a script and that could be extended in the way they wrote it. I was like, oh, this is great. And so the next script or the next script I had to take on, I was like, cool, I don't need to reinvent the wheel. I'm literally going to take what you wrote. I'm going to remove your functions. I'm going to remove the core, like the insides of your functions, and put my code in there. And then I'm going to run it and see if it works and see if I can understand how to do this properly. And then it will work. And I was like, oh, I can just add another function and do this. Yeah. And I can add a helper. I can add a whole file of utilities for little helper functions over here. And it's again by seeing someone else do the same thing that I would do way different than I would do it. Yeah. And then being able to basically copy that. And I will say one of my only regrets in the industry is that I started to get real comfortable with code and start to code a lot more right at the time when I was no longer going to be supporting individual projects. And I almost wish that I would have gone and have been a developer, a pure software dev for a year. I think that really would have helped me. I mean, I'm basically doing that now though. I'm working on some cool stuff in the background. I'm learning a lot. I'm working on some pretty interesting things that are really pushing me. Like they're pushing me. I'm like, man, I'm lost over here a lot of nights. I'm like, hey, I don't know what's going on, but yeah, I'm learning a lot. I wish I would have got more time to do that because it was just such a valuable experience. And it was fun as someone who's dealt with systems for so long. It was fun to be diving into this new thing and actually be finding some success in it. It was pretty rewarding, but we're still trying. But yeah, I mean, moving from your kind of your imperative scripts to a more modular code takes time, and hopefully you can look at others to kind of give you some guidance.
Nice. Man, hey, I thank you for coming on tonight.
Absolutely, man. I really appreciate you having me.
For sure. For those of you that have been watching this live stream or tuning in, we've been talking to Aaron Brooks, who's the CEO of MasterMnd, technical talent pipeline company that specializes in DevOps boot camps, which as of now, they're totally free. You can check out his Twitch, and contact information is all in the description of this video. He shared a lot of great information around DevOps and site reliability engineering and just the overall way the infrastructure is shifting now, even with the cloud. This was a great interview, man.
I appreciate it. I love talking about this stuff, so I really do appreciate it.
Yes, sir.
I do want to also say real quick, just anyone in the chat who came from my community, please give Dewan a follow here and Twitter. A lot of dope stuff, a lot of inspiration. Your inspiration on Twitter is super helpful for me. I thrive on inspiration. It's super duper helpful. definitely, you all know that I'm weaker than in the networking space. This is where you want to come to supplement that stuff for sure. But please give them a follow.
For sure. I thank everybody for tuning in. I appreciate all the moderators that have been managing the chat. I'm going to check out some questions before we go.
Yeah.
We're going to check out a couple. If you see one, go ahead and grab it.
Okay.
And if you all have questions, please just drop them in the chat right now.
Maddox 12 asked when people asked about my setup. And I kind of told them what I had. I'm running. I have two different systems. The system that I game on has a 5900X and a 3080. I waited outside of Micro Center for a very long time to get these things. My other computer still has a 3950X and a 3090. But that's my content creation PC. Someone asked when I'm going to start AI programming with that setup. Probably mid first quarter of 2021. 100%. That one of the reasons why I got the 3090 was for content creation, but it was because I wanted to dive into some AI machine learning, and I want to develop my Python skills. This year, I wasn't diving into Rust. I'm no longer diving into Rust. I learned a little bit about it. I'm going to probably use Rust for a couple small things, but getting significantly better at Python this year. And continuing to develop my skills with Go as well. But I want to get into some AI machine learning. So probably first quarter 2021, and I'll probably be streaming most of it because I'll need all of your help. I'll need your help.
When you do that, man, put something on Twitter or text me or something because I want to be there. That's one thing that I've always wanted to dive in, and I've never done it. I do so much network automation, and I just love that. But I think machine learning would be really cool to, I guess, be a beginner at. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think so too. And like because we're not doing it in our jobs or anything like that, it's a pretty if we're struggling, it's a pretty low, a pretty low risk thing. While we're trying to learn it, it's more for fun and ultimately it may be something that you can utilize in the future to do something great, to make more money, whatever. I think it'll just be. And I think it'll just help your Python skills as well that you can use.
Yeah. I see a couple questions in the chat and I want to get to them, but I thought of something and I think this may be helpful to people. You mentioned that you wish you would have been a software developer for a year, right?
Mm-hmm.
Your career progression, how did you make the decision from being a DevOps technical engineer and site reliability engineer? How did you make the decision to progress your career?
It was purely off of so my first job ever, and I'll be super transparent here about this. First job ever was well, I'm going to skip the help desk roles because those were I actually was working those in tandem with when I was in school. But I worked help desk for the government actually, for the National Institutes of Health. Did that for a while, just really going to fix sound drivers, fix people's sound drivers, re-imaging computers and stuff. I did help desk for about 2 years. Then my first I guess big boy role was a Linux systems administrator at a web hosting company. They actually sat me down and taught me Linux for 6 months. They paid us terrible money because they knew we were going to leave in a year. I'm talking about, I'm doing real thing, real Linux stuff. And I was getting paid. I was driving almost 2 hours for $33,000 a year. But a dope company. I'm not gonna lie. I love that company so much, but it was for $33,000 a year. And I did it for a little over a year. I did it for I was literally paying all of my money in gas because I had a Mustang at the time, and that's when gas was crazy expensive, and gas and food, but also my rent was $200, so carefree at the time. When I left there, I almost doubled my salary to move to the same role in Baltimore, and so it was closer to home, and I almost doubled my salary, and that's when I got the bug. That's when I got the bug of chasing money. It was a mistake. It was also a mistake, but this is also when I got. I started to apply to literally every job. I would literally go online and apply to every job with no intentions of I didn't need a new job. That's the best time to apply for new jobs, when you don't need a job. Yeah. You'll interview better. I promise you'll interview better when you don't need a job. So that's harder for you when it's your first role. When you're trying to move up, it's helpful. And so I got to talk to a lot of people, and I was getting offers. I was like, oh, maybe you don't need to be. I didn't think I was great at all, and I was getting offers here and there. but only up to a certain amount. And then I realized there was a point for jobs that were paying like, I was trying to break like that $75,000 mark, and like all the jobs I was applying for that I couldn't get. Like I was really going into them unprepared, and I started to look at all the tools and things that they were asking for. And I worked at a couple other places in between there, and kind of jumped up to right about 75. And then I got to 75, and then this is still when I was like a systems administrator. I actually got a $100,000 role as a systems administrator, and then but it was tough to, it was really tough to progress. And so I started looking at the roles and stuff, and then I kept seeing Puppet at the time, and I didn't know what it was. And like I said, I was working from home at this role where I was making $100,000 at home. And when I would get done with and I moved back home with my parents to save money. So I don't know who I thought I was balling. I ain't gonna lie to y'all. You know, I had my girlfriend, now wife, you know, we were together, but she wasn't living with me. I was at home. My parents were like, "Oh, you're working? Cool, no big deal." You know, then my dad would make me breakfast in the morning. I was like, I am living the dream, but I didn't want to. I was like, I'll get tired of staying in the house. So I went to Starbucks, and I'm serious. I would watch Netflix, and then I got a Cloud Guru account, or a Linux Academy account, and then I saw that people were like Puppet stuff, and then I was like, cool, I'll learn Puppet. And literally Puppet was the one tool that took me to switch into DevOps and automation, because when you go from managing by hand 20 or 30 servers to being able to manage all of them by writing a little bit of code, it is life-changing. I'll never forget the first time when I installed Apache on 4 servers at the same time. And I was like, this is the way, this is the truth, this is the light. And that's when I was hooked on DevOps. And like, from that day on, I was like diving into more automation and stuff. And that's when I dove back into coding. That's when I was like, okay, I'm gonna start learning how to code more, because like this is it. Like, this is what you need to be great. I took it to my company. We implemented Puppet, because I was like, yo, look at this. We don't have to log into these servers anymore. And we implemented Puppet, and then I left and I started to get purely DevOps roles. And so that's kind of how I did it. You know, long story, but I worked a lot of places and I got lucky.
Nice.
I found something I liked, got lucky.
Nice. Shout out to Alonzo Smith. Thank you for the super chat. The question is, what's your network background?
So one, I've worked in data centers. So like, you know, I can rack them. I can rack systems. My networking background is, I understand switches, and I understand subnetting, and I understand kind of the basics of networking. I understand the whole OSI model. I didn't do a ton in that space beforehand. You know, I can set up a network on a system or a couple systems together and stuff, but never anything super deep. And then once I went cloud, you know, everything is kind of software defined networks, and everything's in the concept of the cloud. I know networking in the scope of the cloud. I know it really well in the scope of the cloud, but like my networking background is not very impressive at all. What
about DNS? How important is that to a DevOps engineer?
DNS is the most finicky. You gotta know DNS. 100% a must know. It's a must know. It's gonna give you the most heartaches, the most headaches. DNS is wild. I know DNS very well.
Awesome. All right, let's find a couple more questions. You good for another, let's say, 5 minutes?
I'm free and open for as long as you need.
Okay, let's get a couple questions. All right, I see a question from Eric Williams. Are there roles that would be ideal before transitioning fully into DevOps, since it's not really entry level, like you mentioned before? Would that be system administration, developer, cloud?
Yeah, I really think any role that supports the delivery of software. So yeah, if you can get a systems administrator role, a cloud administrator role, even like I said, I've even seen people go into it from a business analyst route. I've seen people get into it from QA. So I really think people should look deeper into to QA and to testing, to test engineering. It's a good way to get exposed to literally everything that's being done, and that insight can make you a lot more desirable in those roles. So again, if you can become some type of web dev or software engineer, it's super helpful as well. But anything that's tangential to touching the code and delivering the code, I think is equally as good to help you move into those roles. But yeah, systems administration is usually what I tell people to go to. It's to find yourself. There are a surprising amount of junior sysadmin roles out there. Those can be a really good stepping stone to getting in.
You mentioned something that I and you didn't really dive too deep in it, but you said the bug for chasing money. That's a terrible bug to have. Like, I've been in some painful situations to where I was making less money, learning way more, or being in a situation to where I was making less money, but I was in the perfect environment to grow. And then I go for somewhere to make more money. And then it's like, all right, what's the lesson in this?
Preach, pastor. Like, I mean, hey, I mean, so I'm gonna give you guys two things. One, people hate to talk about money in the industry, which is kind of weird. I think we need to talk about money more, to be honest. But I chased money, and I was fortunate enough to make a lot of little jumps before I hit a bad spot. But when I hit that bad spot, man, I hit it bad. I hit a bad spot so bad that the way that I left this job was after having a conversation with someone about hey, like, I know I'm young. I know that a lot of the people in here are young. I was really defending someone who was older. Like, I had never been talked to the way that this guy was talking to the team. And I had a conversation with him before about it. The place was just terrible. We worked in a room with no windows. Anyway, like, so it was just, everything about it just wasn't great. I wasn't learning a lot at all. And we got out of a meeting one day for something that happened, and he was yelling at an older guy on the team like he was a child. And I was like, hey man, like, I walked out the door. I was like, look, I'm leaving because I'm gonna hit you. Like, I really am a nice guy. I was like, bro, I'm gonna put my hands on you. Like, I can't handle this. And I think one of the problems was, at the time, I think I was 26. 25 or 26, and like, so I was young. I think he didn't take me seriously, but I was like, I'm gonna walk out because, like, I can't believe that people, I had never seen this before, and I walked out. I shouldn't have walked out. Your boy was not in the financial position to be walking out of a job at the time, but luckily, with the right skills, I had a job within a week, for 20 grand more, actually. But I ran into problems twice when chasing the money, when just like, cool, I'll just take this. I almost made one of the worst mistakes of my life. Even in my last role, I almost left. I was thriving there. I was learning a ton. I was working with amazing people, and it was just like, hey, let me just see what's out here. Let me just see what kind of money's out here. And I almost left, and it felt wrong. It was the first time where it felt bad, and luckily, it all worked out in the end. But yeah, I mean, to an extent, if you have a family to take care of and you have needs, you might have to do that. But once you start moving to roles purely for the money, and seeking out roles purely for the money, I promise you, you're in for a problem. You're in for a problem. I think there's a reason why people are willing to pay so much in some roles, like like they know they're about to put you through some bad stuff. So just be wary. There's a balance. I think if you're learning where you are and you have support where you are, and they're giving you enough, and you're okay with the money, I think you should stick it out as long as you're still learning and growing, because I think it'll ultimately serve you better in the future. A bad step could ruin your career, to be honest. If you don't get out of there fast enough. I watched people go for money and then stay because the money was so good, and essentially ruin their upward mobility. So just be wary of that, but bad situations.
So, Linux Van Norman, thank you for the super chat. I'll get to your question in a minute. I want to ask this question about that position that you walked out of. You mentioned that you shouldn't have done it looking back. For someone that may be in a situation where something's going on at work and it's challenging their morals. It's demeaning the way they look at life, and it's a struggle for them to even wake up. What advice do you have for them on how to handle that situation?
Yeah. My advice in those situations is to immediately begin looking for a way out. I wish that I handled it in a different way, because I think I could have made the situation completely better on my side. I think I could have made it better for both me and the people who were still sticking around if I had handled it a little bit differently. But follow your gut. When you get to the point where you're dreading waking up to go into work, start looking. Like, I think you should start looking for an out. And I think even the act of starting to look for that out is therapeutic. And you start to get excited about the possibilities, and it kind of helps you through your days there. But I think it's important. I think people will sometimes I'll either stick it out, or just this is how it is, and people don't actively work to change their situations. And I can understand it. You either get comfortable. You're like, okay, well, I've been here. I know they're not going to fire me. It's a good place. If I go somewhere else, I got to learn a bunch of new stuff, and it might put me on the chopping block. You don't know what kind of company you're going to get in. I mean, look, when you get to the point where you're like, you wake up and you're dreading this, just start looking for options. Doesn't necessarily mean a new company. It could mean to move somewhere else within the same company, or it could be, maybe you decide to handle the situation and handle it with the person, or take it up the chain, or whatever. But begin immediately thinking about what your options are for remedying this. And I think specifically around once you dread waking up, that is the point when when you dread every day, man, I'm not trying to go do this today or deal with this. That's the point to me.
Yeah, true story. All right. For those of you that are watching, Aaron has a unique skill set, and some of you may be on that trajectory or may already have those skills. I'm gonna ask you this, Aaron. What made you set out and start your business on your own?
I was fortunate enough to be put in a position. I was put in front of someone who believed in me more than I believed in me. When I tell you that I almost made one of the biggest mistakes I could have by chasing money, when I was going to leave, it was purely for money, and it wasn't even for that much more money. But the company I worked at, if anyone's looking for a role and everyone looking for a dope tech company, I worked at a company called Fearless.
Yeah.
Fearless Solutions in Baltimore. Fearless.tech is the website. The pretty dope owner is a guy by the name of Dalali Jarasa. And he literally asked me, we had a meeting with him, and he literally asked me, when we first joined the company, he asked you, what are you passionate about? And he wants to know what your passions are outside of work. And I told him, simply that tech, I have been living a life that I never thought I would live. Like I told you, I was living at home with my parents, making six figures, going wherever I wanted, buying whatever I wanted, just doing the things that I enjoyed. And tech had changed my life, and I was passionate about showing other people how to get that done. And he provided me so many opportunities over the years to do exactly that. And basically, I have been working with an organization called the Baltimore Black Techies. It's a meetup in Baltimore, and we have been building curriculum and stuff. And I'm actually about to go. It's a bunch of people's birthdays tonight. I'm going to call into a call after this to kind of just hang out with them, because those are my friends now. But we have been teaching curriculum and stuff, and I loved it. I loved it. We accidentally took it online one day, or because a bunch of people couldn't make it after work, and so we were like, "All right, cool. Let's do a Google Meet, and we'll make it happen." And he was like, "Hey, I'm doing this thing called Hutch. We didn't have a name at the time, but I'm doing a digital services incubator, and I know you don't have a business idea, but I think you would be great at this. I think you should go through it." So I trusted him, and so I went through it, and I learned a lot about myself through it. But I was put in front of someone. I was put in front of a mentor who mentored me into this. I would never thought I would be a business owner ever. So that's how I got here for somebody else.
I'm glad you brought him up. I didn't know that until I saw a LinkedIn post where he was congratulating you or something. He's a brother from Baltimore. or he's from Baltimore, right? Or yeah,
He's from Maryland. He's been in Baltimore for a while though. Yeah.
okay. He, it's a blessing to have someone in your life that wants you to succeed, even if it means letting you go or you passing them. Like, that's a, man, bro, you was a blessed dude. I'm just being honest.
Ooh, facts. I will never hide. Everyone out here want to be self-made. Nah, no. I've had exactly that. And so it makes me even more so want to find a way to be that to someone. Like, I become a blessed all the time, because it's not even just him. There are more people there. There's a partner in the company. His name is John Foster. Got to shout him out as well. Like there's so many people that at this organization who have poured into me. Like I'm super blessed. Like I understand that this is not something that happens to most people. I'm very aware of that. But how can we make it happen to more people? I think is the key. But yeah, definitely blessed. I had a level of mentorship people can only dream of.
Man, yeah, this has been inspirational. I know you got to get to your friend's birthday party and chat. I thank you for coming on, Aaron. For those of you that have been watching the interview, Aaron Brooks is the CEO of MasterMnd Technical Talent Pipeline, company that does boot camps. Those boot camps are free right now. He runs them through his website and through his Twitch. So all of his contact information will be in the description of this video. If you're just now watching this video, I highly recommend you watching the replay. And if it helps you, share it out and follow Aaron on Twitch, Twitter, wherever, because he's inspirational and he's leading in this industry. Thanks, bro.
I appreciate it. Again, thank you for what you do, man. Like I again, super inspirational. Thank you for being a mentor in this industry. Thank you for opening up and not being a gatekeeper to the information that you have and sharing people and showing people the way. It's super valuable. I saw the conversation you were having with some other people. I saw the rebuttal to your conversation. I want to talk. I want to talk more about that one day if y'all ever have time, man. But I just seriously just thank you for what you provide. Thank you for the community that you're building around this. Thank you for showing people and helping people believe that it can be done, because 2000% it can be done. They need us, everybody. They need they need us to learn these skills. Tech can change your life, man. And you can use that tech to change the world, honestly. So thank you.
For sure. Man, nobody wants us to leave. Here's another super chat. Thank you, Kenneth Jeff, for the super chat.
Answer. I'm good. We can answer it.
All right. So we're going to answer this super chat, and then once it runs out, we'll leave. So this super chat is, I've been a DevOps engineer for about a year now, and I was wondering at what point does everything click? I ask because the tools are endless, and this is true, and the time it takes to implement solutions takes a while. That's a great question.
Yeah. Ooh, that's a phenomenal question. And I can't give you a time that it'll take for it to click. I think it'll take a different amount of time for everyone. I'll tell you, for me, when it clicks, and I think when it clicks for most people, I think the problem is when you first get into DevOps. Right now, you're doing the thing, like you're just doing the thing, and you probably don't yet fully understand why. Like, I think you understand why you're doing the thing in the context of the solution that you're putting in place, but it's really at the point when you really understand why any of these tools exist. What problem is this thing really solving? Then the tools stop mattering. The tools completely stop mattering. Right now, I know that there are a subset of categories, and I'll pull any tool. Like if you tell me I have to use one that I don't know, I know what it does. I know what it does, and I know why it does it. And once you really know why you're doing what you're doing is when it all clicks. Like I didn't get good. Like I got good because I understood that, okay, I finally see why we need to I finally see why we're writing all this. At the time we were writing CloudFormation, I hated it. And when I finally understood some of the design decisions around the way we're writing our CloudFormation, which I couldn't understand before. Once I understood why that was beneficial is when things started to click. I was able to implement solutions much faster when I understood those things. Like right now, you could give me, if you give me a problem and give me an arbitrary tech stack, like I'm going to be able to solve it for you. I'm going to be able to give you a solution. Perfect? No, it's not going to be perfect. It's going to have problems, but I'll give you a solution. And again, it comes into place when you stop focusing on like doing the thing and like just implementing the thing into like, why are you doing the thing? Once you really, really understand like the true whys of why you're doing the thing, it gets surprisingly easy. Yeah, you're like, okay, well, I know why I'm doing this, but like I have no idea how to do this in this language. Sure, yeah, you'll struggle for a day or two, whatever. But it's much easier. It's much easier in that aspect. You're never gonna know all the tools 100% at all, but I think that's when it started to click for me. Just when I understood why.
Yeah, that's it can be a painful journey. You mentioned something earlier in the interview about it's okay to skip steps.
Mm-hmm.
Can you kind of break that down?
Yeah, I for the longest time, I mean, and I see it all the time, is that I understand why learning seems so linear. Like why you think you need to touch this and then you need to go to this before you understand these things. But a lot of the times the context of the problems that you're solving, they're not linear. They're not they're absolutely not linear. They didn't use the three pieces in the middle. They use the first two things that you're supposed to learn, they skip the next five things, and they use two, farther along. It's okay to dive in and work backwards. It's okay to like, okay, all right, well, I know what this thing does. You show me what it does. I have no idea how it works underneath the hood. Let me start to understand that. Let me start to work backwards and figuring out why this thing was implemented. And this is also because when you take a challenge, when you're learning something, and let's say you were trying to implement, maybe you were trying to do something with Terraform and you were having a lot of trouble, it was giving you a bunch of errors, and you do a bunch of Googling. Again, your eyes, you're going to read through all kinds of solutions that may not be valid for your particular problem. But I'm telling you, they're not going to make sense at the time, but your brain's going to pick them up. You're going to learn that, oh, I didn't know Terraform had this little function that you could do. Like, okay, cool. And then I didn't know, oh, why is this person's code, like, how did they make this block? I've never even seen that block before. And you pick up these things that aren't immediately useful, but when that next challenge comes along and you dive 10 steps forward, like you can fill in the gap that's in between that knowledge really quickly. Like by going all the way over here, you can start to be like, oh, well, I picked up all this stuff. I didn't know where it went on the timeline. And it's like, oh, I can just fill it all in. I can fill it all in. It makes sense. I've created a bridge from this thing that I saw this thing 3 months ago. Didn't know what it was then, but it all makes sense now in this brand new context. It's never going to make sense linearly. It's never, like, you're going to have to skip the steps, and it's completely okay not to know the things in the middle. I know how to do a bunch of advanced stuff, and I don't know how to do anymore a bunch of medium or simple things. Like there's a lot of simple things that I don't remember how to do or don't know how to do well. And so it's okay. It is completely okay for that to happen. It's completely okay for you to jump around.
Man, I thought I was the only one that would forget something that I should know. And it's, nope. I think it takes more. I think the more senior you get on your journey, the more that becomes real, and accepting that you're not going to retain all this information. It's impossible. Mm-hmm. Like when you were actually in the field, did you this is a 2-part question. How was your documentation for the things you learned? And did you focus on what the tasks in front of you, or were you trying to learn things ahead of you?
My documentation was awful. It was terrible. So I kept a Google Keep. I used Google Keep for a long time, and I would have all these random snippets that had zero organization of like commands.
Yeah.
And so, and my mind would remember where stuff was somehow. And I would save a bunch of stuff. I did a terrible job at it. It's interesting because I'm really good at it now. I used to took on Notion, and for me, it works really well for organizing my thoughts around that stuff. So I would check it out if people was free. It's dope. But yeah, it wasn't. Yeah, my documentation wasn't very good at all for trying to do that. What was the second part of that?
The second part was when you're in the field, did you focus on your job or did you focus on learning like the latest technology and being ahead?
Oh, both. And so everyone doesn't have time to do this, and I completely understand it. But when I was at work, I would be all in on trying to get the task done. And I would research and I would do all the stuff for the things that were needed and upcoming, like imminent. And then when I left, I'll go play my video games and stuff. But then I would stay up and I would go learn. Like, okay, I know that we're going to be diving into these things later. I don't know. Like, I know some stuff about Docker. Let me dive into Kubernetes, or I know this stuff about AWS, but I'm not up to date on these services. And so I would do a little bit of both. But like, I think I spent more time on the what was due now,
Okay.
than that I was currently working on than the future stuff. But I did spend time on the future stuff.
Okay, cool. Thank you, Sean English, for the super chat, and thank you, Eddie Valme, for the super chat, and congratulations on the new DevOps engineer role.
Dope! Congratulations, it's got to feel good.
Yeah,
Definitely got to feel good.
He's joining your boot camp as well.
I appreciate that. Just give me a shout out. Let me know who you are when you're in there. Yeah, that's pretty dope. Congratulations. Let us know how it's going. I always like to hear how it's going, and if it's what you expected, and kind of what's going on in the role. So I'd love to hear more about it.
Cool, man. Is there anything you want to say before we out of here?
One, if you asked questions that we didn't get to answer, or you had something specific for me, please feel free to shoot me a message or tweet me on Twitter. I'll get back to you for sure. Other than that, again, the inspiration, seriously, you can do it. 100%. I promise you can do it. If I showed you I told you I never finished school. If I show you my college transcripts, you're gonna be like, hey man, that boy kind of stupid. If you look at, if you see my college transcripts for when I was there, I've never been the smartest person in the room. But you can utilize, you have skills that you can lean on to make yourself great in the industry, to be able to navigate the industry. And the only way to develop them, just like it, you know how to, if you wanted to get swole, everyone, it's hard to do, but you know what to do. I got to hit the gym. I got to eat right. I got to hit the gym. You know what to do. If I go in there every day and I lift the weights, I'm going to get stronger. No matter what, you're going to get stronger over time. Now, you may fall off the wagon here and there, but you know that if you do it, you're going to get stronger. Same thing here. Immerse yourself in it. Do the practice problems. Some days you may feel like you're going through the motions. I didn't understand this thing. You're getting stronger with every rep you do. You're getting stronger. So just stick with it. 100% you could do it. Embed yourself into a community, or at least one community, in the lab every day, wherever, mastermind, wherever you can. Don't do your best not to do it alone. Get some people around you can talk with, have fun with, share some memes, share some fun links, and help you out throughout the journey.
Man, I'm motivated. I'm about to hit these weights.
I'm not.
I'm about to hit these weights. They got me hyped.
He was ready. He had everything right there. I'm worried. I was planning on losing a bunch of weight before the baby came. I don't know. I lost a bunch of weight before COVID started, and then COVID came, and I gotta chill.
Hey, we might have to start an accountability group, man, because I gotta get on it, man, before this summer.
I'm with it. 100%.
Bet.
I'm with you.
Bet. Hey, I appreciate everybody tuning in. Shout out to my cousin Dale, my boy Mark, Tiffany, Cody, all the moderators that were in the chat, Eric Williams, Robert Anderson, James Thompson, Xavier Wharton. We appreciate you all. Please like, share, subscribe, and we'll catch you on the next one. Peace.
Peace.